So today we're going to talk about how to do an air and a strapless air. I think everybody gets into kiteboarding because they see people boosting huge and catching air is that main attraction of the sport, and doing it on a surfboard is that next evolution. So today, let's talk about how to do a strapless air on your surfboard. I'm Evan Netsch. Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to look at how to do a strapless air on a surfboard. Certainly a lot more challenging and harder to do than with foot straps, and for that reason I think a lot of people find it that much more rewarding, and a 2-foot air, I would say, on a surfboard is just as fun, just as exciting, scary, and more challenging than a 25-foot air on a twin tip. So today we're going to talk about how to do those strapless airs on the surfboard. So let's get into it right now. So first off, I would say when you're looking to do your first strapless airs, think about your gear. I'm not talking about gear in a lot of these videos a lot, but on this particular one I am. I'm going to speak about gear and speak about conditions. One, you want a board that is fairly light. Frankly, you don't have foot straps, your board weight makes a huge difference. So look at boards that are light. This board I ride a lot. It's considered the Pro Construction from Cabrina. It's a lighter weight board. It makes strapless airs a lot easier, especially in light wind conditions. Second, look at your kite. You want a kite that depowers a lot because you need to keep that board stuck to your feet. Most modern kites will depower a lot, but certainly I would not be riding a sea kite or maybe a freestyle oriented kite that has a bit more pull and sits further forward in the wind window. Besides that, pick your day pretty carefully as well that you're going to start working on this. If it's only blowing 15 miles an hour and you're underpowered on a 14-meter kite, it's going to be tough. So definitely find the day. More wind helps a lot. It makes it that much easier to jump. Of course, as you know, you can jump higher, easier in more wind. But more importantly, you need that wind, and the key principle of doing a strapless air is keeping the wind on the bottom of the board. And we're going to talk about doing airs today without grabbing the board. So I'm going to call it no cheating, which makes it that much harder, and you're really relying on your momentum and that wind staying on the bottom of the board to keep that board glued to your feet. So how to do it? How am I going to go about my strapless air? Where do I even begin? How do I not just jump right off my board and leave my board behind? And the key is really taking small steps, and you never want to out jump your, basically I'd say, your pop with your kite. You can create a lot of lift from your kite, and you can always just go launching straight off your board. So you need to create your the lift you create with the kite needs to kind of match the amount of wind and lift you can kind of create with the board to keep that board balanced on your feet. And the main principle in it is keeping the bottom of the board into the wind. And with the wind on the bottom of the board, that's going to keep the board being blown up into your feet. And you can also assist this by kind of where you maneuver the board and the momentum that you carry. So as I go into my strapless air, I like to kind of ride with a lot of speed. As much speed as I'm comfortable with, as long as I'm not, let's say, out of control. And the more speed that you can ride with, one, allows you to turn more into the wind to create more pop, and two, speed basically is apparent wind, and you can turn that speed kind of almost into more wind on the bottom of the board if you point your nose of the board, or you point your board in the right direction. So as I'm riding along, we want to keep the kite fairly high. I like to be sheeted out. The sheeting in is creating my lift, and I'm going to sheet in to create lift more so than I'm going to make some big drastic kite movement, because we really need to keep our momentum going forward. With a twin tip, you can get upward lift that just rips you straight up, or even you turn your kite past noon to really create a lot of lift, and it pulls you backwards and the board comes with you. Well, with a surfboard, you're going to leave that board behind. So I like to always keep my kite basically on the forward of noon. So as we're riding, I'll ride along sheeted out, and I usually have just my top hand on the bar, and I'll allow the kite to slowly kind of be drifting up, but never past 12 o'clock. As that kite's drifting up, I'm lining up my takeoff point. Maybe it's wave, maybe it's a little piece of chop, but I'm just looking at it and I'm saying, all right, that's where I'm going to leave the water. And as I carve up off that little takeoff point, that's when I sheet in on the bar to create some lift. When I sheet in on the bar, at that same point, I'm going to kind of stop the kite movement. The kite's been moving up, and now as I sheet in, that's going to kind of be the highest point that the kite goes right as you take off from the water. So as you sheet in, we're going to carve up into the wind, really pushing off our back foot. As I go into the jump as well, normally riding, I'm pretty far forward on the board. I like to widen up my stance, get my foot kind of over those back fins for a lot of control. And so as I carve up into the wind, when I leave the water, I want the nose of the board pointed almost straight into the wind. And I push off my back foot, and the nose comes up high, the nose comes up first, and this puts wind underneath the bottom of the board, and you'll almost feel that board lift. So you're getting lifted by the kite, but that board's also getting lifted off the water and getting pushed into your body. So as I leave the water and the kite was drifting up, now I sheet in for that lift. Now I stop pulling on my back hand. And what I like to do, even right when I leave the water, is let go of my back hand. You no longer need this hand on the bar, and just having your front hand on is going to make sure that kite doesn't keep going back, and you kind of stop that kite movement, and you can almost start having it drift back forward. So as we leave the water, straight up into the wind, we've sheeted in on the bar to create that lift. And now when we're in the air, we're kind of balancing our power by sheeting in and out with how much lift is coming from the board. So if it's super windy and maybe you're not that powered, but it's super windy and that board's lifting really hard, you can sheet in a lot to give your body more lift. If the wind's lighter, or your board's a little bit heavier, or you're really powered, so you're getting more lift from the kite, then I'm really sheeting out a lot in the air. I'm trying to ditch power in the kite so my body doesn't out jump my board. So it's balancing that, pushing the board to your feet with how much lift you're getting from the kite. And you can feel that. You can feel if your feet kind of start coming disconnected. And if they start coming disconnected, you're really sheeting out to kind of drop your body back down onto the board. And I also like to bend my knees as well. So when in the air, my knees are bent. That way I can have that ability to manipulate the board and keep that board on my feet. If the board starts falling off, you can kind of like straighten your legs a little bit to catch it. Or really what I like to do is suck my back leg up and suck both legs up as possible to get that board as close to my body as possible when at the peak of my jump. Because when I start coming back down, that's when it's going to be harder to keep the board with you and you're going to start getting disconnected. So we went straight up into the wind, nose into the wind. Now at the peak of my jump, usually I'm pretty sheeted out because I'm maxing out my jump. I'm trying to ditch power in the kite. I'm trying to bring my body back down over top of the board. Now as I start falling back down on top of the board, or back up for 1 second, as we get to the top of the jump, we're sheeting out. What I like to really do now is the nose of the board was high, and now I kind of rotate, and I'm pushing the tail back into the wind, and I'm doing that as I'm sheeted out, kind of maxing out my jump. Pushing the tail into the wind, one, keeps that wind underneath that board, and I kind of roll my toes forward a little bit too. You don't want all your weight on your heels, because that's going to tilt the deck of the board into the wind and blow the board off your feet. So really control that board on the ball of your feet when you're in the air, especially your back foot. I kind of try to push it into the wind. Now pushing the tail of the board into the wind also points the nose of the board downwind, which is how you want to land. You want to land with the nose of the board pointed off the wind. And so for like a smaller jump, I mean, that's what you're doing. You're carving into the wind, and you're basically doing a 180. You're shifting your back leg out, extending the board behind you. That way you can land off the wind. And now, as you start coming down, we were sheeted out with the nose pointed downwind. Now we're falling down onto the board. And if we're coming down really hard, I like to sheet in again as we land. And that one re-engages that kite for power, and two, that kind of softens your landing. So if you land sheeted out, you're landing with a lot of weight onto that board. And that's gonna be a hard landing to stick, especially without foot straps. Your feet might slide out a bit. So right as I touch down to land, I really like to sheet in to kind of one, pull myself downwind to land with speed, and really just soften that landing. So that is the principle. The principle is balancing your kite movement, your sheeting on the bar, and the lift from the kite with how much wind is getting underneath your board, and really just using your knees, using your feet to always keep the bottom of the board turned into the wind. And remember, as you leave the water, wind's gonna come up underneath the nose. Try to shift the board kind of, I'd say, between 90 degrees and 180 degrees by pushing your back foot back, and that brings the nose of the board downwind. Then as you land, sheet in again. So that is your basic jump on a surfboard. As that timing gets better, as your pop gets better, as you get more comfortable with the kite, you of course can go higher and higher and higher. And then as you go higher, all those movements just kind of slow down. You might hold the nose of the board into the wind longer. As you do that 180 in the air, you might do that 180 slower to take more time and keep that wind on the bottom of the board. And yeah, before you know it, your jumps will be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And just like on a twin tip, I think it's one of those things where every year you ride, every year you progress, you can always add a little more height to your jumps. And I think that's what keeps everybody coming back for more. So I hope this was helpful for today. For more videos like this, feel free to subscribe below. And we're gonna really talk about everything that pertains to riding a surfboard to hopefully help improve your riding. Thanks so much for joining us today.